The market was alive with noise, voices shouting, creatures haggling, metal clashing, the smell of roasted meat mixing with smoke. But in the middle of all the noise sat a small figure, silent. She was no more than a child, her skin pale and marked with strange glowing patterns, her wrists bound by heavy chains, her bare feet pressed against the cold stone floor. Her eyes, large and bright, stared at the ground, never lifting, never hoping. The traders had placed her on a wooden block like broken equipment. People walked past. Some laughed, some spat, some did not even look. To them she was nothing, just another alien slave. The child did not cry. She had learned long ago that tears meant punishment. Her silence was her shield. But inside, her heart was tired. Tired of the voices calling her worthless. Tired of the kicks when she stumbled. Tired of being treated like a thing and not a person. The chains rattled when she tried to move. Every sound reminded her she belonged to no one and nothing. Then, as the day dragged on, a man walked into the marketplace. He was human, tall and broad-shouldered, his clothes simple but worn from travel, his eyes sharp, scanning the stalls. He had come for supplies, food, maybe parts for his small ship, but when his gaze landed on the block, he froze. For a moment, the noise around him seemed to fade. He saw her sitting there, too thin, too still, too silent. He took a step closer, the traders noticed. One of them grinned, showing yellow teeth. "Ah, human, you have a good eye," the trader said, tapping the girl's chain with his stick. "Cheap stock, not strong, but maybe useful for cleaning, maybe useful for worse," he laughed. The man's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Instead, he crouched down, lowering himself to the girl's level. The child tensed, her chains rattled. She did not dare look at him. Slowly, he reached out, not to grab, not to hurt, but just to touch the cold metal of the chain. The crowd noticed. Some laughed, some whispered. "Why waste time on that one?" someone said. "She is broken," another added. The human ignored them. His eyes locked on the child, and then he spoke, his voice steady, calm. "What is your name?" The child flinched. No one had asked her that in years. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. She shook her head, afraid to answer. The trader laughed louder. "She has no name, no use. Pay me a few coins and take her. Pay me nothing and I will throw her to the pits tomorrow." The man's hand tightened on the chain, but his eyes softened. "You are not broken," he said, softly, only loud enough for her to hear. "Not while I stand here." The word struck the child harder than any whip had. Her chest burned, a sound caught in her throat. She wanted to believe, but fear told her it was a trick. The crowd grew restless. The trader sneered. "So, human, do you want this useless thing, or are you just wasting my time?" The man stood, tall, his shadow falling over the girl. His voice rang out, not just to the trader but to all who watched. "She is not useless." The marketplace fell silent for a heartbeat. The laughter died. Even the traders stopped moving. It was a dangerous thing to say, to call a slave child worthy, to speak against the cruel rules of the market. But the man's eyes did not waver. The trader scowled. "Big words, human, but words do not buy chains," he spat. "Do you have the credits or not?" The man reached into his pocket slowly, pulling out a worn pouch. Inside was not much. A few coins, hardly enough, but his hand did not tremble. He looked down once more at the child, her eyes finally lifting to meet his. For the first time in years, she saw someone looking at her not with hate, not with disgust, but with something else, something she did not understand yet. The human dropped the pouch on the table. The coins, clattering, the trader picked them up and counted. His face twisted. "Not enough," he snapped. "She costs more, much more." The man did not step back. He leaned forward instead, his voice low but sharp. "If I walk away, you have nothing. If I stay, you have something. Choose." The trader hesitated. The crowd leaned closer. Some grinned, waiting for a fight. Others whispered about the strange human who dared to challenge the rules. The child's heart pounded. She could not breathe. Her body shook. She wanted to scream, to run, but she was chained. She could do nothing, yet for the first time, she felt the chains grow lighter because someone else was pulling against them, not her. The trader's greed finally won. He snatched the coins, muttering curses. "Take her then, but she will only bring you trouble." The human knelt once more, his hands gentle as he lifted the chain. The lock was rusted, but with a hard pull it snapped open. The sound of breaking metal echoed through the square. The girl gasped, her wrists free, her skin burning from where the cuffs had cut deep. She looked at him, her voice barely a whisper. "Why?" The man smiled faintly, though his eyes were hard as stone. "Because someone should have cared," he said. The crowd stared, the trader scowled, but the human stood tall again, his hand resting lightly on the child's shoulder. The marketplace was no longer filled with laughter, only silence. And in that silence, a story began. The crowd had not forgotten the scene. Whispers followed the human and the girl as they left the wooden block behind. Traders muttered curses. Some laughed quietly. Others shook their heads. None of them believed the man would last long with such a burden. The child walked slowly beside him, her steps unsteady. Every sound made her flinch. She still expected the chain to pull her back, but it never came. His hand rested gently on her shoulder, guiding her forward. She had no name, no voice strong enough to speak. Yet in her chest something stirred, a strange warmth she did not recognize. The human moved through the market, his jaw set, his eyes scanning. He knew the trouble was not over. Buying a slave child was never simple. Not in this city, not in a place where greed ruled every deal. Soon, a heavy voice called out behind them. "Human," it boomed. "Stop where you are." The man turned. A different trader approached, larger than the first, his skin dark and scaled, his teeth sharp. His eyes filled with suspicion. He wore the mark of the overseers, the ones who controlled the slave markets. "You think you can walk away with her for scraps of coin," the overseer growled, pointing at the girl. "She is worth 10 times what you paid. She belongs to us, unless you can match the price." The child froze, her chest tightening. She had seen overseers before. They were the ones who decided which slaves lived and which were thrown away. Her body trembled as if chains still bound her. The man stepped forward, shielding her with his body. "I paid the trader what he asked," his voice calm but firm. "The deal is done." The overseer laughed, a sound like grinding stone. "Done? No, you think we care for your deal, human. She is rare. Her bloodline sells for high credit in the inner systems. You want her? You pay what she is worth." The crowd gathered again, sensing conflict, eyes hungry for entertainment. The man's hand tightened on the strap of his bag. Inside he had little left, barely enough for his own fuel and food. To match the overseer's demand would mean giving everything, leaving him stranded, helpless. He looked down at the girl, her eyes wide, her body shaking. She expected him to give up, to walk away. She had seen it before, many times. Buyers who refused to pay more left her behind. Her lips formed silent words. Don't fight. Don't risk. But she could not speak them aloud. Her throat locked with fear. The overseer stepped closer, his shadow falling across them. Decide quickly, human, or I will take her back and you will leave empty-handed. The man did not move, his mind raced. He had traveled through war zones, survived storms on broken planets. But this was different. This was a choice of heart, not survival. He knelt, again meeting the child's eyes. "Do you want to leave with me?" he asked softly. Her mouth opened. No sound came. Tears welled. She had never been asked what she wanted. Not once the words caught in her throat, but she nodded just once, trembling. The overseer scoffed. "What does it matter what she wants? She is nothing. She is property." The man stood, his eyes cold, his voice cutting through the crowd. "She is not property, not to me." Gasps spread, dangerous words spoken again. Words that could earn him punishment, yet he did not waver. The overseer snarled, his claws flexing. "Then pay the price, human, or face the cost of defiance." The man reached into his bag, pulling out another pouch heavier. The last of his savings, the credits he had meant to repair his ship, to buy food for the journey ahead. He threw it down at the overseer's feet, the coins spilling across the stones. "Take it," he said, his voice low but steady. "It is everything I have." The overseer crouched, counting quickly, his greedy eyes glittering. Then he laughed. "Still not enough, human. You insult me. You insult the market." He raised his hand as if to strike. The girl gasped, stepping back. But the man stood firm, his shoulders straight, his eyes unblinking. "Then I offer more," he said. The crowd hushed. Curious, the overseer narrowed his gaze. "More? What more could you possibly offer?" The man pulled from his belt a small object, a silver token marked with strange symbols, rare, valuable, the last piece of his past. It was more than money. It was memory. It was sacrifice. He held it out, his hand steady. "This, it is worth more than her weight in credits, you know it." The overseer's eyes widened, greed battling with suspicion. Slowly, he snatched the token, examined it, then grinned, with sharp teeth. "Very well, human, she is yours, but you are a fool. She will bring you only ruin." The crowd murmured, some laughing, some shaking their heads, but no one challenged further. The overseer pocketed the token and turned away. The man exhaled slowly, his hand falling back on the girl's shoulder, steady and sure. She looked up, at him, her eyes wet, her lips trembling. Why give so much?" she whispered, her voice faint. He looked down, his face tired but resolute. "Because you are worth more than they ever knew." Her chest ached, the words sinking deep. Too heavy, too strange. She had never been told she was worth anything. Her knees shook, but she walked beside him. As they left the market, shadows followed. Unseen eyes watching, traders whispering, bounty hunters listening. The price had been paid, but the danger had only begun. The girl's hands were free, yet fear still clung to her like a second chain. She did not know if this human would protect her against what came next. She did not know if freedom was real. But in her heart, a small light flickered, the first fragile spark of trust. And as they disappeared into the maze of the city, the overseer's words echoed like a curse. "She will bring you only ruin." The city changed when the sun fell, the bright stalls closed, the smoke thinned, and the alleys filled with shadows, whispers, and danger. The human walked quickly, the child close at his side. Every corner felt like an eye watching, every sound like a step behind them. The girl's bare feet ached on the stone ground, but she did not complain. Her wrists still burned from the broken chains, yet she stayed silent, afraid that speaking would bring attention. Afraid that if she made a mistake, he might leave her too. The man kept his head low, his coat pulled tight. He had bought her with all he had, but the overseer's greed meant others would come. Bounty hunters, thieves, men who killed for coin. He could feel the weight of their eyes already. At last, he turned into a narrow street, the buildings leaning together above them. No lanterns, lit only darkness and the faint glow of the girl's markings on her skin. She noticed him glance at the glow. Her heart sank. "I can hide them," she whispered, pulling her sleeves down. He shook his head, his voice low but firm. "Do not hide who you are, just stay close." A sharp sound cut through the night, the scrape of boots, the clatter of metal. The man stiffened. He pulled the girl into a side passage, pressing her gently against the wall. 3 figures passed the street ahead, armed with shock spears, their voices carried. "The overseer says the human has her. Find them before they reach the outer gates." The girl's chest tightened. She gripped his sleeve, her breath fast. But the man's hand rested on her shoulder. Steady, calm, she listened to the rhythm of his breathing, slow and controlled, and copied it. When the hunters moved on, he led her deeper into the maze of alleys, twisting and turning until even she lost sense of direction. The city felt endless, like a cage of stone. Her body trembled with exhaustion, but she pushed forward, because his hand still guided her. She was not used to hands that pulled her forward instead of pushing her down. It gave her strength she did not know she had. Finally, they reached a ruined building, its walls cracked, its roof half fallen. The man guided her inside. The air smelled of dust and rust. but it was quiet, hidden, safe for now. He searched the shadows, then nodded. Satisfied, he sat against the wall, pulling a small pack from his shoulder. From it he brought out bread, dry but fresh enough, and a flask of water. The girl stared, her lips parted. Her stomach ached with hunger. She had not eaten since the morning before. Still, she did not reach out. She had learned long ago that food given was food stolen later. The man broke the bread in two, placing half in her hands. "Eat," he said simply. Her fingers shook. She stared at the bread, then at him. "Why?" she whispered, the word catching in her throat. He looked at her, his eyes calm, his voice steady. "Because you are hungry. Because you need it more than me." She blinked, confused. No one had ever said that before. She hesitated, then finally lifted the bread to her mouth, biting slowly, the taste plain but warm. Tears stung her eyes. She quickly turned away so he would not see. The silence stretched, broken only by the sound of chewing. The man sipped from the flask, then handed it to her. She drank carefully, afraid to spill. When she lowered it, her voice was barely audible. "I should not trust you." He gave a faint smile, tired but gentle. "You do not have to. Not yet, but I will not harm you." Her chest tightened. She wanted to believe, but belief was dangerous. It had cost her before. Still, the warmth in her belly, the bread in her hands, the freedom of her wrists, all told her this man was different. Then outside, a sound, heavy boots again. The man tensed, rising quickly. He gestured for her to stay down. She crouched low, her body small, her markings dimming as fear cooled them. The hunters' voices echoed faintly, closer this time. "Tracks lead this way. Spread out. Find them." The girl's breath caught. Her heart hammered. Her mind screamed run, hide, disappear. But her legs refused to move. Fear paralyzed her. The man crouched beside her, his whisper urgent but calm. "Listen to me, stay quiet, follow when I move, do not let go of my hand." She nodded, trembling. His hand reached for hers. She hesitated, then placed her small hand in his. His grip was firm, warm. It anchored her, gave her something to hold on to besides fear. The hunters entered the ruined street, lanterns glowing, weapons raised. They spread apart, scanning the rubble. The man waited, every muscle tense. Then, when one hunter stepped too far ahead, he pulled the girl with him, slipping through a broken archway, silent as shadow. The girl stumbled on loose stones, nearly falling, but his grip held her steady. She bit back a cry, her heart racing, yet he never let go. Step by step, breath by breath, they moved deeper into the ruins. The hunters' voices, growing fainter until finally the sound of boots faded into the distance. The girl sagged against the wall, gasping, sweat on her brow, her eyes wide with terror and wonder. "You did not leave me," she whispered, disbelief heavy in her voice. He looked at her, his gaze steady. "I told you I will not leave you." She stared at him, her lips trembling, and for the first time in years she allowed herself to believe just a little. Her chains were gone, but now something new was beginning, something she did not yet understand. The night grew colder, the city darker, but inside her chest, a fragile spark of trust burned brighter than the fear, and in the distance the hunters cursed the shadows, not knowing that in those very shadows a bond had begun to form, a bond that would change everything. The night dragged on inside the broken shelter. The roof leaked drops of water from cracks above. The air was damp and cold, yet it was safer than the streets. The human sat with his back against the wall, eyes half closed but still alert. Every sound outside made him tense. Every echo could mean danger. The girl sat across from him, knees pulled tight to her chest, the glowing patterns on her skin faint, as if her body wanted to hide them. She watched him silently, her mind spinning. She had eaten the bread he gave her, but hunger still gnawed deep inside. It had been so long since she had felt full. Food for her was always scraps thrown on the ground, yet this man had broken his bread in two. He had given her the bigger half. She did not understand why. Her throat tightened as she whispered, "You are strange." The man opened his eyes, slowly, his gaze calm. "Strange?" he asked, his voice quiet. She nodded, hugging her legs tighter. "No one gives without wanting something back." He leaned forward, resting his arms on his knees. "You think I will take from you later?" Her lips trembled, but she nodded again. It was all she had known. Kindness was always followed by cruelty. The soft words always turned into commands. Her body braced for that turn even now. But the man did not laugh, did not grow angry. He only said, "I gave because you needed it, not because I want anything." The girl frowned, her eyes searching, his face looking for the trick, but his voice stayed steady. His expression stayed calm. She felt confused. Her stomach knotted with fear and something else, something she did not recognize. Her voice cracked as she asked, "Then why me? Why not someone else?" He looked at her for a long moment, then said simply, "Because everyone else walked past and I could not." The word struck her like a blade, sharp and heavy. She lowered her head, her glowing eyes wet. She pressed her face into her knees so he would not see the tears. But she could not hide the sound of her breath shaking. The man did not move closer. He gave her space, his voice soft. "Cry if you need to, it does not make you weak." Her body shook harder, years of silence breaking in small, painful sobs. She hated herself for it, hated the sound. But once it began, she could not stop. The man did not touch her. He let her cry until the sobs faded, until she sat trembling but empty, her chest lighter though her eyes burned. When she finally lifted her head, her voice was hoarse. "I do not know how to trust." He nodded slowly. "Trust takes time. It is not given in one night." She stared at him, her small hands trembling. "And if I never learn?" He met her gaze without flinching. "Then I will wait, for as long as it takes." The silence after his words was heavy but not sharp. It wrapped around her like a blanket, unfamiliar but not frightening. She lowered her arms a little, her body less tense, though her eyes still flicked nervously at every sound outside. Her hunger growled again, loud enough to echo. Her cheeks flushed with shame. She had already eaten his food. She did not want to look greedy, but her body betrayed her. The man reached into his pack again, pulling out a small piece of dried meat, barely enough for a meal. He broke it and handed half to her without a word. She shook her head quickly. "No, you keep it. You need it." He pushed it gently into her hand. "So do you." Her throat tightened, the weight of the food in her palm heavier than chains. She held it for a long time before finally bringing it to her lips, chewing slowly, carefully, as if afraid it would vanish. The night grew colder. The wind howled through the cracks of the broken walls. The man pulled his coat tighter and shifted closer. Not too close, but enough to shield her from the draft. She glanced at him, unsure, then leaned slightly toward the warmth, her body craving it more than her mind allowed. Her voice was small, almost lost to the wind. "If I fall asleep, will you leave?" He turned his head, meeting her wide, fearful eyes. "No," he said, steady as stone. "I will not leave." She searched his face, every line, every shadow, trying to see if he lied. But all she found was tired honesty. Her chest eased just a little, her eyes heavy with exhaustion. Her body wanted to resist, wanted to stay awake, but the warmth of his presence, the food in her stomach, the soft certainty of his voice finally broke the wall she had built. Her head lowered against her arms, her eyes closing. For the first time in years, she slept without chains cutting into her skin, without fear of a boot waking her, without the cold of the stone floor pressing her bones. The man stayed awake, his eyes on the doorway, his hand resting on a small knife at his belt. He knew danger was not gone. He knew the overseer's men would search the city until dawn, but he also knew that for this one night, the child deserved rest. He watched her chest rise and fall, small and steady, and whispered quietly, words meant only for himself. "You are not alone anymore." Outside, footsteps echoed faintly in the distant alleys, hunters still searching. But inside the ruined shelter, two strangers had begun something, stronger than fear. The girl dreamed for the first time not of chains, but of hands that pulled her forward, of voices that said she mattered. Her hunger was not gone, her trust was not healed, but the first fragile seeds had been planted, and as the night slowly turned toward morning, the man's eyes stayed sharp, guarding the fragile hope that had begun to grow between them. Morning crept into the ruined shelter, light spilling through the cracks in the roof. The human was still awake, his back stiff, his eyes heavy but alert. Beside him the girl stirred, blinking in confusion. For a moment she thought she was still dreaming. No chains, no whips, no cruel voices, only the sound of birds and the quiet presence of the man. When she sat up, he handed her the flask. She drank slowly, then wiped her mouth with the back of her small hand. Her glowing pattern shimmered faintly in the light. She looked at him with wary eyes. "You did not leave," she whispered. "I told you I would not," he answered, his voice steady. The child hugged her knees, her stomach still hungry, her body weak, but something inside her felt different, lighter. She was still afraid, but less than before. For a brief moment, she let herself imagine what it might be like to stay with him, to never return to the market. But the thought scared her more than comforted her. She quickly pushed it away. The man stood, stretching his shoulders. "We cannot stay here," he said. "They will search every ruin, every alley until they find us." Her chest tightened, fear rushing back. "Where will we go?" she asked. "Somewhere safe," he said, though his tone was heavy, as if the word safe was more hope than truth. They moved quickly through the waking city, avoiding the main streets. Slipping through the narrowest alleys, the girl stayed close to his side, her hand clutching his sleeve whenever voices grew near. She trusted his steps even when she did not know where they led, but the eyes of strangers still followed, whispers still carried behind them. By midday they reached the edge of the lower districts, where crumbling towers cast long shadows and rusted machines lay forgotten. Here the hunters were fewer, but the danger was not gone. As they paused in the shadow of a broken tower, a figure stepped from the darkness, tall, cloaked, familiar to the man. "Ren," the human said cautiously, his voice low. "I did not expect to see you here." The cloaked figure smiled faintly, though his eyes stayed sharp. "And yet, here we meet." Ren replied, "I heard whispers of a foolish human buying a slave child. I thought, it cannot be you, and yet—" His eyes drifted to the girl. "It seems it was." The girl shrank back, pressing against the man's side, her markings dimming in fear. "She is not a slave," the man said firmly. Ren chuckled softly. "Of course not. Not to you. But to the overseers, to the hunters, to the law, she always will be." The man's jaw tightened. "We need a way out of the city. Can you help us?" Ren tilted his head, his smile not fading. "Help? Yes, for the right price." The man sighed, his hand pressing against the empty pouch at his belt. "I have nothing left." "Not true," Ren said smoothly. "You still have her." His eyes glittered coldly as he looked at the child. "Rare blood, rare markings. I could sell her for more than enough to buy you a new ship, new life, freedom without burden." The girl's breath caught, her chest freezing. Her eyes widened as she looked at the man, waiting, fearing, her whole body trembling. She had known this moment would come. Kindness always ended this way, always. But the man stepped forward, his body blocking Ren's view, his voice cold. "She is not for sale, not now, not ever." Ren's smile faded, replaced by a sharp edge. "You speak boldly, old friend, but bold words do not change the truth. The overseers want her. They will not stop, and you will not survive." "Then I will fight," the man said. Ren's eyes narrowed, then softened again, false warmth in his tone. "You always were stubborn, but think of yourself. You are hunted, you are weak, you risk everything for nothing." The man did not answer, his eyes steady, his body tense. Ren sighed dramatically. "Very well. If you will not listen, then perhaps others will." He raised his hand, and from the shadows stepped more figures, armed, armored bounty hunters, their eyes sharp and hungry. The girl gasped, her hand gripping the man's sleeve tightly, fear flooding her body. betrayal burning in her chest. Ren had led them into a trap. The hunters spread out, surrounding them, weapons drawn. One hissed, "Surrender the child human and we will let you live." The man drew his knife, small against their weapons but his stance unshaken. "If you want her, you will have to kill me first." The girl's breath came fast, her body frozen. She could not move, could not think, only watch. Her fear choking her, her mind screaming, the same words it always had. "You are nothing. You are worthless. No one stays." But the man's voice cut through the storm, firm, strong. "Stay behind me," he said, not as a command but as a promise. The hunters advanced, Ren smirking in the back. The sound of metal clashing echoed as the man blocked the first strike, his knife flashing. He moved with skill, but he was outnumbered. Every blow he blocked drove him back. Every strike chipped away at his strength. The girl's heart pounded. She wanted to run, wanted to hide, but something inside her twisted, a memory of his words. "You are worth more than they ever knew." Her lips trembled, her voice barely a whisper. "Why do you fight for me?" The man's eyes met hers for just a heartbeat, fierce and unwavering. "Because you deserve to live." Something cracked inside her, not fear, but something stronger. Her breath came deep, her body shaking not with terror but with a rising fire she could not explain. The hunters pushed closer, blades flashing, the man bleeding from his arm, his body slowing. The girl's hands clenched, her markings glowing brighter, light pulsing beneath her skin. The hunters faltered, their eyes widening. Ren's smirk fading into shock, the girl stepped forward, her voice no longer trembling. "No," she said, soft but sharp as steel. And for the first time, she was not only the one being protected, she was ready to fight. The ruins shook with the clash of weapons. Sparks flew as steel met steel. The man fought with everything he had, his knife flashing, his boots driving against the broken stone. But he was only one against many. His breath grew heavy. Sweat mixed with blood from the cut on his arm. Still, he refused to fall. Behind him, the girl's markings glowed brighter, pulsing with light that spread across her skin. The hunters noticed, their eyes widening. One shouted, "Careful! She is awakening!" The girl's chest burned. The fire, rising inside her, was wild, frightening. But it was not pain. It was power. For the first time in her life, she felt something inside her answer her fear. The man blocked another strike, grunting as the shock from the weapon numbed his arm. His knees almost buckled, but then he heard her voice, small yet steady. "Stop hurting him." The hunters laughed, circling. One hissed, "Or what, little slave?" Her glowing eyes lifted, no longer filled with only fear, but with something fierce, something alive. The light from her body brightened until it cast long shadows on the walls. The man turned slightly, his eyes meeting hers for a heartbeat. He saw the glow, the trembling fire in her, and he whispered quickly, "Do not fear it. Use it." Her heart pounded. She had always been told her markings were shame, that they meant she was cursed, dangerous, but now for the first time someone told her they were strength. Her hands clenched, the glow spread down to her palms, sparks dancing in the air. The nearest hunter lunged toward her, but before he could strike, a burst of light exploded from her hand, pure energy. It struck him across the chest, sending him crashing into the wall with a cry. The rest froze, their eyes wide. The girl gasped, staring at her own hands, trembling. I did that," she whispered. The man's voice was strong despite his wounds. "Yes, and you can do more." The hunters growled, rushing forward together, but the girl stepped beside the man instead of behind him, her small frame shaking, yet she lifted her glowing hands, the fire inside her rising higher. One hunter swung his blade, but she raised her arm instinctively. The weapon struck the glow and bounced away as if hitting solid steel, the energy shield flaring bright. The man moved with her, striking another attacker with his knife. Together they pushed back against the wave. The girl cried out, not in fear but in raw strength. A beam of light burst from her chest, blinding the hunters. The shockwave knocked two of them down, the ruined floor cracking beneath their weight. Her body shook violently. She had never used such power, it drained her. But the man steadied her. his hand pressing against her back, his voice calm. "You are not alone. Control it with me." She closed her eyes, listening to his voice, breathing with him. The wildfire inside her slowed, shaping instead of breaking. When she opened her eyes again, the glow was steadier, controlled. She lifted her hands and the light formed into sharp threads that wrapped around a hunter's weapon, pulling it from his grasp. The man struck him down with swift precision. Ren, watching from the back, stepped forward finally, his smirk twisted into anger. "So that is why they wanted you," he hissed at the girl. "You are not just rare, you are dangerous, a weapon worth more than I imagined." His words cut deep, reminding her of the chains, of the market, of being treated as nothing but property. But then the man's voice rose beside her, strong and clear. "She is not a weapon. She is a child." The girl's breath caught, her chest heavy, tears welled as the fire burned brighter. This time, not from fear but from the fierce truth of his words, she screamed. A wave of light bursting outward, it slammed into Ren, sending him sprawling back into the rubble. The remaining hunters hesitated, fear creeping into their eyes. One shouted, "She is too strong. Retreat!" They scrambled, dragging their injured with them, vanishing into the ruins, leaving behind silence broken only by the crackle of fading energy. The girl collapsed to her knees, her body trembling, her breath ragged, the glow dimming until only faint lines of light pulsed under her skin. She looked at her hands, wide-eyed, whispering, "I am a monster." The man knelt quickly, gripping her shoulders gently but firmly, forcing her to meet his eyes. "No," he said, his voice steady. "You are not a monster, you are alive. And you are strong." She shook her head, tears streaming. "I hurt them, I destroyed." He shook his head back. "You protected, you saved us, you saved me." Her lips trembled, her chest aching with a feeling she had never known. No one had ever spoken such words to her. No one had ever told her she had worth, not as property, not as weapon, but as herself. She leaned forward, her forehead pressing against his chest, her body shaking with silent sobs. He wrapped one arm carefully around her, holding her steady. "It will not be easy," he whispered, "but I will teach you. I will help you control it. You are not alone anymore." For the first time in her life, her sobs did not echo in emptiness. They were caught, held, comforted. The ruined walls stood broken around them. The city still hunted them, but inside the shadows, courage had been born. Fire had been unleashed, and a fragile bond had turned into something unbreakable. As the light of morning pushed through the cracks, the girl's markings glowed faintly, no longer in shame but in quiet strength, and the man's tired smile held a promise stronger than chains. The fight was not over. More would come. The overseers would not stop. But for now, they had survived. Together. The city was restless after the battle. Word spread quickly. Whispers of a human who had defied the overseers, and of a slave child who burned with light and drove hunters into the dust. Every corner buzzed with rumor. Every shadow watched for them. The man and the girl moved quietly through the ruins, their bodies sore, their steps heavy, yet neither stopped. They could not. Danger still hunted them. The girl walked with her, head lowered, afraid of her own power, afraid of what she had done. Yet the man's steady presence at her side kept her moving forward. At last, they reached the edge of the city, where broken towers gave way to rocky plains. The walls loomed tall, guarded by armored soldiers, the gates shut tight. Escape impossible. In daylight, the girl's heart sank. "They will catch us," she whispered, her voice filled with dread. The man looked at her, his eyes firm. "Not if we are smart, not if we stay together." They waited until the sun dipped low, until shadows stretched long across the plain. Then the man led her toward a narrow passage beneath the wall, half hidden by rubble, a forgotten escape route from older wars. The girl squeezed through first, her small frame slipping easily. The man followed, scraping his shoulders against the stone, the sound loud in the silence. When they emerged on the other side, the air felt different, open, cold, filled with the smell of grass and dust. The girl froze, staring wide-eyed at the sky, no longer blocked by towers, the stars beginning to shine. She whispered softly, almost in awe. I never saw them like this. The man smiled faintly, watching her eyes lift. They are yours too, he said. Her chest tightened, her throat thick. No one had ever told her anything belonged to her. Not even the stars, but their escape was not yet safe. Behind them the gates clanged, voices shouting, soldiers spilling onto the plain, torches flaring, the overseer's hunters not far behind. The man gripped her hand tightly, pulling her into the tall grass they ran, their breaths harsh, their feet pounding, the lights of the city fading behind them. The girl stumbled, her legs weak, but every time she thought she would fall, his hand held her steady, pulling her onward. They reached the mouth of a cave carved into the hillside, hidden by overgrown vines. The man pushed them inside, the darkness swallowing them, the soldiers' voices distant but growing. They collapsed against the stone. Gasping, the girl pressed, her hand to her chest, her markings faint but glowing softly. They will not stop, she whispered. No, the man admitted, his voice rough. They will not, but we will not stop either. The girl looked at him, fear and hope warring in her glowing eyes. Why do you keep risking everything for me? He paused, his face shadowed in the dim light, then said slowly, because you deserve more than chains, more than fear, because no child should walk alone. Her breath shook, her lips trembling. She whispered words she had never dared before. I do not want to be alone anymore. He placed his hand gently over hers. Steady, strong. You are not. Not now. Not ever again. Tears welled in her eyes, but they were different this time, not from despair but from something fragile and new, a warmth in her chest that grew stronger with each heartbeat. For the first time she let herself lean against him fully, her small frame resting against his chest, her body no longer braced to flee. She whispered one word, soft, hesitant but filled with meaning. Father. The man's eyes closed, his breath heavy. The word struck him deeper than any blade. Slowly, he wrapped his arms around her, holding her close. Daughter, he murmured back, a word that bound them tighter than blood, tighter than fate. Outside, the soldiers searched, their torches bright against the night, but the cave remained hidden, the two inside unseen, untouched. The girl drifted into sleep, safe in arms that promised protection, safe in a world that, for the first time, gave her hope. The man stayed awake, his eyes on the cave mouth, his knife ready, but his heart was lighter than it had been in years. He had nothing left of his old life. No coin, no ship, no plan, but he had something far greater. He had someone to protect, someone who gave meaning to his steps. The stars above shone brighter, as if watching, as if bearing witness to the fragile bond born in the darkest market, carried through fire and betrayal, and now alive in the quiet shelter of the cave. The child who had once been called worthless, broken slave, was no longer any of those things. She was a daughter, and the man who had once been only a wanderer was no longer alone. Together, they had faced chains, hunger, betrayal, and fire, and though the road ahead was still filled with danger, it was also filled with something stronger, something that could not be stolen or sold. Family. And in that cave, in the quiet between breaths, the human and the alien child began their new beginning, not as master and slave, not as rescuer and rescued, but as father and daughter,